Well, marketing is literally the joke is like marketing's so fun. Everyone has an opinion on how to do my job better than me, and I hear it constantly.
That's so true for HR too.
This is L&D Unlocked, a series for L&D and HR professionals looking to unlock the future of learning and development. Presented by BizLibrary, L&D Unlocked is an ongoing series where we speak to industry experts and thought leaders about the future of work, workplace trends, and how your organization can prepare today for the challenges of tomorrow. Learn more at bizlibrary.com.
Welcome to another edition of L&D Unlocked. I am so excited to introduce my guest today, Hebba Youssef. Hebba has done all things in the world of HR, so we're going to really dive into her experience and learn a lot from her today. She is currently the head of all things people and culture for an awesome media company called Workweek. And she is also the author of an absolutely incredibly named newsletter for HR professionals called the I Hate It Here newsletter. Hebba, how are you doing today?
Doing well. I mean, it's a morning and we already know I'm not a morning person, but I will get myself together and be like in fine form in like the next hour. So you're
Well, that's
getting me as I'm
perfect.
becoming the best version of myself.
I'm getting you in your most real.
Yes,
I
my
like
most
that.
honest self.
And you told me you haven't had coffee yet today. So this is like, we're playing with fire a little bit.
I know. I'm trying to do this thing where I don't drink coffee on an empty stomach and I eat a real breakfast and then I have coffee. And it's really not working for me. So
It's not going well.
it's
Well, I don't
going
know if
well.
you've heard, like, apparently the first 45 minutes you're up, you're not supposed to drink coffee because your
Mhm.
natural cortisol. Yeah, I read that. I'm like, it's true. I don't need coffee in the morning. And I'd probably be better if I wasn't all jittery on an empty stomach, but I do it anyway.
But I want it. I love the way coffee tastes. I've been drinking coffee since I was like 12,
Yeah.
which is
It's the
probably
routine
why I
more than
love.
anything.
Yeah,
Yeah.
agreed.
Look at us already off to the races.
We're doing it.
Well, so Hiba, I kind of introed what you're doing with Workweek a little bit, but talk to me about kind of your origin story, your background, and how you got to where you are today.
Love it. My origin story is probably like a lot of HR people. I didn't want to work in HR. I really thought I was going to go be a product manager. I was like fascinated by tech and I wanted to help build it and shape it in a way that I thought users would like. And then I took a detour in my career where I went to go work for a mentor. And one of the first projects they put me on was to build a global learning and development program. And that ended up escalating into me moving into HR and then running a global learning and development team for 3 years, traveling the world, learning like how to engage with employees in an L&D environment, support their growth and development, and build engaging trainings. From there, I like went into talent management and then became the head of people and now the chief people officer at Workweek. I've done anything and everything you can think of in HR, from scaling a company, doubling it in size, to growing an HR team from an HR team of one to many, to traveling the world and training people across different cultures. So I think the thing about product and people that I think are very similar is you're building something. And with product, you're building a product. With people, you're building people and their growth and skills. And I think the segue from product to people to me was just like very natural. And it turns out I'm like kind of good at the people ops stuff. Turns out like I might be good at it.
Who knew?
Who knew? I mean, I always thought I hated people, but I always joke like I'm your resident people hater. It's because people are complicated and I love a challenge. And so working in HR every day is challenging. But I also was in HR during the height of the pandemic, watching the world unfold as we all went remote. And then, we were disconnected from each other to the summer of social injustice and unrest. I was in DC for a lot of the things that were happening in the world. And it's been very interesting working in HR during those times because it felt like we gave more and more and more and more of ourselves. And it the job itself, I think, just like became so much. And so when I came to work at Workweek, I was telling them, I was speaking to the co-founders about the struggles of working in HR, and they asked me if I had ever written a newsletter. And I said, "Me? No, I like talking." And they're like, "Well, if you could write a newsletter the way you talk, we think a lot of people would appreciate it." And I said, nobody wants an HR newsletter. And they were like, what if you could make it like your personality in the newsletter and you could write about HR the way you see it, the way I think a lot of people would relate to it. So eventually I agreed and I joined Workweek as their chief people officer and a creator, which is very unique because we have some creators that are internally at Workweek where we support them in their development of their newsletter. And then I get to work on the operations side as our people person and I get to write as a creator. And that was how I
So
Hate It
cool.
Here was born. Yeah, I Hate It Here is actually the way we named it was very interesting. Our CEO Adam Ryan said he did not want to name it I Hate It Here, and he tells the story openly as well. And I told him I was like, I can't write this newsletter and call it anything else. HR people will gravitate toward this. They will get it. They will understand it. And he was like, okay, I trust you. And now he like tells the story. He was like, I was so wrong. I should have listened to her. She knew exactly what she was doing. So I Hate It Here was born because working in HR during the pandemic was awful. And it still is today, somewhat terrible some days because we're given so much to do with usually such little resources that sometimes internally we feel like we hate it somewhere. And our biggest fear is that our employees feel that way. And so
You got the weight of the entire employee base on your shoulders while you're like, I heard you say in another podcast, and I feel this way, interestingly, and like in the C-suite, right? Like it's kind of similar. Like
Mhm.
there's no HR for HR people. And like similarly, when you manage a big team, it's like sometimes there's no one for you to go to because no one understands your problems and you can't speak about them.
There's no one to talk to. So then that's how I write. I basically write the newsletter for me a few years ago who really needed to hear these things and hear about the part of the job that is really hard. Like this job is like wonderfully
Mhm.
fulfilling and so inspirational some days. And then on the other side, it's absolutely awful and so hard.
I
But it's
could totally see that. You said something that I think made me one realize why you are such a good HR person, likely for Workweek. But two, what I imagine, right? Because you and I have talked about this, is a struggle for HR people as well, and it's being yourself, but also being super honest. Like it's empathy, right? Like and being able to be very honest about the challenges in like a self-deprecating way or a fun way that like it's not all rosy and everything isn't always perfect because I've seen HR people who like put on that facade and everything is so tight-lipped and so tight that you don't feel comfortable. And you guys have to toe this line of like, first and foremost, you have to be likable and trustworthy, but in a way that feels very relatable. And that is so hard based on what the jobs that you do are.
Yeah. It was an authentic, like the word of the year this year or something. Like they named I can't remember where, but someone said like authentic was one of like the big buzzwords of the year. And I think it's really hard for HR people to be authentic because there's so much that we know confidentially that we can't say out loud. And also, if a decision is made, even if we disagree with the decision, which, like, spoiler alert, we do disagree with a lot of the decisions that some CEOs are
Yeah.
making, we still have to potentially fall in line, for lack of a better phrase, and support the decision. And so you're finding with a lot of HR people, like people say, like, don't trust your HR team. Like they're not there for you. They're there for the company. And the reality is like, yeah, we are there for the company, just like you are there for the company. Like the company needs to exist so that we can keep our jobs. But at the same time, there's a way to keep the company in mind while also caring for the people and in a very authentic way where like I sometimes say, hey, I might not have agreed with that, but like I'm on board to do it. Here's how we're going to talk about it with the employees. And I make sure that the talking
Mhm.
points to me never feel disingenuous because I can't sell that. It's just not my personality.
Well, and it's your job. I love that. Like, you don't have to be on board with everything. Same with me, right? Like, I don't have to be on board with everything that's determined by, the board or the president or whatever it may be. But if I can get on board with the rationale behind it, it is my job then to explain the rationale, and people can get on
Yeah.
board with that if it's all communication.
Yeah. Oh my God. Everything in the workplace is a communication problem. I could talk about that till I'm blue in the face. It's just like no one knows how to communicate well. We all went remote. Tone is so hard to understand via like email or
Mhm.
text. And it's just created so many interesting problems in the workplace that people like don't know how to talk to each other.
Well, we all figured it out because we had to. And then
Yeah.
there was no like, hey, no, this is the new normal now. It's not just like you're going back to the old way. there are new rules, and yeah, we're all figuring that out at different levels.
And some of us aren't doing it well. I think like a lot of people are still struggling with the hybrid world and how to talk to people and how to set expectations correctly. And then they turn to HR and they're like, fix these problems. And I always want to be like, well, I can fix them, but also you can also help fix them. Like together we could fix them. But that's why I think like sometimes being in HR is so hard is like we are very selfless people that want to fix everything.
Yeah.
And sometimes you have to let other people fail at something for them to learn how to do it correctly.
Yeah, I could see that. Well, and like I'll tell you, communication is like the number one. We just did a giant survey. Number one skill like that everybody is focusing on. No
Not surprised.
surprise, right? Like at all levels. But also like you spoke to something I know HR people struggle with too. Is like it's honestly, it's so fun leading this podcast because I come from the marketing world, and so many of your
Mhm.
challenges are so similar to marketing challenges,
Yes, yes.
because we're support departments, right? So like
Yep.
marketing people want to just salesperson raises their hand, anyone raises their hand needs something, they just want to jump and do it and be helpful. And it's very difficult, I think, for HR people to, like, to your point, sometimes ask the right questions to be like, this is not a me thing. This is not our
Mhm.
department thing, or we only own part of this.
That's so true. We're both marketing and HR like trying to tell a story, need to be really good storytellers and also just like really good curious thinkers and listeners. And I think sometimes it's easy to just like fix the thing, like say here you go, I'll do it, I'll fix it. And other times it's harder to let people fail. It
Yeah.
really is. Because like the core of our job as well, I say the days I feel best in HR is when I'm helping other people be successful. And sometimes that's a good trait and sometimes it's a bad trait because when it's bad, I just want to go help them fix the problem. I don't give them the time or space for them to actually think, how can I fix this? And that's where I think HR gets into a lot of trouble is when we are always seen as the fixers and never the enablers. Like we need to enable other people to fix things across the organization. We can't fix everything.
Yeah. You actually, it's giving, I mean, we see this in L&D too. It's like the only L&D people that are successful or HR people who run training programs actually have stakeholdered and engaged with the managers of departments and things like that. No, and it's the same. You get the eye rolls, right? You get eye rolls from marketing or HR when there is not buy-in across an organization for any initiative. And you know before someone even signs a contract if it's going to work or not based on that buy-in through the sales
Yep.
process.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. There's nothing employees love more than to complain about things, and I don't blame them because a lot of companies will treat employees terribly and they deserve to complain. But I think the hard part about working in HR is like everyone has an opinion on what you do. I don't know if it's the same in marketing, so I'm like honestly curious. But in HR, it's like every single thing I do, every decision, every process, every choice we make, somebody in the organization has an opinion on it. Usually everybody.
Well, marketing is literally the joke is like marketing's so fun. Everyone has an opinion on how to do my job better than me, and I hear it constantly.
That's so true for HR too. Or
Oh,
someone
that's
will be like,
amazing.
"Why did you do that? Why are we doing that?" And I'm like, "Why do you have to ask why? Why can't you just tell me with like my years of experience or just trust that I'm going to make a good decision?" I understand why explaining the why is important, but at the
Yeah.
same time, some days I'm just like, "Leave me alone." Like I just want to be left alone to do this job in peace.
Yeah, you made me think about because I'm just thinking about all the HR people I've worked with and like the challenges they've had to be successful. And what is interesting is like the characteristics of a successful HR leader, right? Like I wonder what
Mm,
those are because what you described your first job in your career that was like project management. You wanted to get into product management. You had to be developing a global learning program, really good at managing projects and making sure it went to fruition, making sure you stakeholder with different audiences. Um, that's like a very analytical side of your brain, right? But then you
mhm.
need the other side, which is that creative. I'm building the story in parallel with this, whether you build it or you get marketing's help or you've got a communication person. And I don't know, I'm curious your perspective because you've been in so many roles seeing this. Like, where do HR people generally fall and get it wrong or right? And I know that has so many implications for kind of the makeup of an HR department. But when you talk about like HR team of one, like what is that person? I know they have to do everything, so they're not great at anything likely. But what are just, yeah, maybe the characteristics of good HR people from your perspective?
Oh, this is such a good question because there's this like talk I went to at a conference 2 years ago that sticks in my brain. I think about it once a month. I really should message the man on LinkedIn and tell him I think about his talk once a month.
That
But
you've
in
been
his
talking
talk,
about his
yeah, I've been
speech
talking about
every
his
time.
talk literally once a month. I think about it. But he made a comment that like HR is one of the most interdisciplinary like functions where we have to have skills, more skills than potentially any other function in the org or any other, yes, function in the organization. So like, let me explain it. It's like HR people have to be really good at like selling our ideas. We have to be really good at stakeholder management. We have to be really good at like negotiation and conflict. We have to be really good at marketing our initiatives, especially if you're an HR team of one. You have to have more skills than I think anybody else at the company has. And you're right, it makes it really hard to do one thing really well.
Yeah.
But I think like where an HR person gets really good at their job is they know how to balance what the business wants, what the business needs with what the employees want. That is a very it's not like a real skill. I can't give you like a conflict resolution. Like to me, it's more the best HR person understands like the business needs this, but my employees want this. Where is the middle ground where I can win for both parties?
That's fascinating. Yeah, it's I don't even know if this is the principle, but like it makes me think of like the utilitarianism, like where can or like a mediator, right?
Yeah,
Where
yeah.
between these two very disparate groups, where can I be the person in the middle making the most number of people happy with the decision, knowing that there's always going to be the quiet few that are probably the
Mhm.
loudest, that are unhappy, but you have to make those trade-offs.
Yeah. And that's where I think like the bad HR teams, the one that we hear about all the time, those are the ones that are erring on the side of the business, that are doing everything that the business wants and needs and not pushing back on that and
Yeah.
forgetting about the employees. I think those are the bad HR team stories that you hear where they're not thinking about how is this impacting our people. And ultimately, we should always be thinking about the people because we've seen all the stats and all the studies out there like the more engaged your employees are, the more productive they're going to be, the more profitable your company is going to be.
Yeah.
So, striking that balance between the two, I think makes you an exceptional HR person. You also like really have to be good at conflict. And a lot of HR people I know hate it. They hate saying no and they hate being in conflict. But we do the business and the people a disservice if we are afraid of saying no and being in the middle of a conflict.
Yeah.
Those
Well,
are like
and
two.
those are really good. I mean, you hit the nail on the head too. Like I'm thinking about it all comes back to being a partner to executives, to leadership, and just the challenge of that though, right? Because you're too curious, you ask too many questions. It's boy, this person's difficult to work with, right? But
Mhm,
you have to
mhm,
have a relationship there where it's like, no, we're all working towards the same thing. Because I've also seen the world you're describing, which is like, hey, the HR team is perceived as great because they're doing everything that the business thinks it needs and everything that shareholders or the
mhm.
board or whatever it is are saying. Yeah, they have great job security, but the people are suffering because their
Yeah,
voices aren't being heard.
yeah. It's such a I love my job, I do, and then at the same time, I simultaneously have feelings of rage and hate, and I can't
That's
figure out.
everyone. At least now, like we're more open about that than we ever were, right?
Yeah, yeah, there's so many things that just, like, make me feel really good about the world I'm building, and then other days I'm like, "I cannot." The humans people make this job so complicated, they make everything complicated. The world is the way the world is because of people, right? And
Yeah,
then in HR, everything we do is people are at the core. There's like nothing I build or do or touch or think about that doesn't have a people component. And then each person is like different with different perspectives and lived experiences and thoughts. And so trying to navigate all of that at times can feel super overwhelming on top of like everything being thrown on HR any given day. And
yeah,
so I just think like your average HR person is probably burnt out and unhappy.
yeah. Oh, I believe it. Hey, this is an
Crazy.
awesome time to do a quick cutaway to a little bit more about BizLibrary.
At BizLibrary, we know that employee development and retention have never been more critical to your business. We help you build learning programs that create safe and inclusive work environments, elevate employee skills, and develop leaders who drive results. So now, you can take award-winning BizLibrary content and put it to work to help overcome your biggest challenges. BizLibrary, where learning happens.
Okay, so all of this conversation actually made me think, Hiba, about was randomly on TikTok the other day and was fed up this Simon Sinek, like, this is TikTok. It was like a 5-minute video. I'm like, I know all Simon Sinek stuff. I'm not watching this. And I watched it and I learned a lot from it. So I wanted to get your perspective though, because it was fascinating. He's talking about how, and you and I have talked about this because we both manage, or in our organizations there are a lot of Gen Zers, right? And these are people that have just come out of college. Fascinatingly, what I've realized with mine, like they don't even know what it's like to be in an office setting. Many of them, so like this isn't weird to them. Like remote is just what they're used to. Like whereas for you and I, like I came out of the pandemic being like, we're going to go back into the office because we have to, right? Because that's how you build relationships. And that's, you go to happy hours, you go to lunches. And I realized, like, why am I pushing these things? Half our employee base doesn't even know that world, nor do they want that, clearly. So,
Yeah.
but what he said that you've kind of like alluded to, so I'm curious your perspective, is because because these Gen Zers came out of the pandemic and into the workforce for the very first time, and we were all sitting at home, many of us, right, like making some generalizations, isolated and working without talking to friends, without going to events, without joining, clubs or having friends over for barbecues and all of these things for 2 years. The workplace had to become all of those things for that generation. And honestly, for us, right? Like we're millennials, but like I felt that. Like work was your solace. You talk to people all day, every day about work, but a lot of us were just talking about like, my God, the misery that we were going through and the isolation. But speak to that, right? Because I hadn't thought about that for that audience as well as many of us. Like it made your job even harder because you're having to probably decouple those a little bit, right? And like try to help people understand that what I see a lot is like work isn't going to be everything for you. Like it can't be, right? Like you're not going to love your job every day. Many of us don't, but that doesn't mean you should leave tomorrow because you don't feel fulfilled for a week without purpose.
Yeah, Gen Z is fascinating to me. I have like read books. I just like I consume anything about Gen Z. Their relationship with work is so different from millennials' relationship with work. Like
Yeah.
I grew up in like the hustle culture, work late, work 24/7, give everything up for work. Who cares if you don't align with the mission? You have to do it to get a promotion. And I feel like Gen Z is like, that's not for me. And it's like commendable. But I'm also like, oh my God, how do I keep you fulfilled at work? Like that's like a real thought of mine where I'm
Yeah.
like, if I'm not giving them enough or what they want, I don't want them to leave. And so my way of thinking about it is like, this is a generation that is having a very unique and different work experience from me. And my only way of understanding what they want and need is to ask them. So I talk to our like Gen Z colleagues regularly where I'm like, what do you want from work? What do you need from work? Like, do you feel fulfilled? What would make you more fulfilled? What would make you less fulfilled? Having the open dialogue with them, I have found incredibly helpful because then I actually can think through HR and workplace management and growing the company in a way that takes their perspective into consideration. But what they really want to know is that they want to know that they're continuing to learn and grow. I think that is the baseline of it. Like fulfillment, yes, but like we exist in a capitalist society. You're not going to find fulfillment in everything. Like
Yeah.
our society exists because we have to like it has to make money. So I think like saying I just want fulfillment is very different. Because then I'll say like you can go work for a nonprofit. Like there's lots of ways to get fulfillment that way. If you want fulfillment at this job, like what is it that you are excited about to learn and how can I help you learn said thing? And so I think that is one way to like really work with Gen Z and understand what it is they want and also like respecting their boundaries. It's very hard for millennials to respect anyone's boundaries. But Gen Z has boundaries and they have set them and they're very clear about their boundaries. And I think we would do better if we respected their boundaries more.
Oh, that's fascinating. Yeah, I think actually I just saw authentic was probably one of the words of the world. Riz was
Just
was
yes,
another
the other
one.
one.
And
That kills me.
God, I want to so badly remember what Riz is, but I don't. Is it like being cool?
Charisma. No, it's charisma. It's
Oh,
short for charisma.
Riz, yes.
I had to ask. I asked multiple Gen Z colleagues. I actually ask them all the time. I'm like, is this smart or funny or cool. And sometimes they'll be like, no. And other times they'll be like, that's tacky. Don't do that. And I'm like, well,
Well, the reason I know I'm old is my brain went to the movie Grease, and Rizzo
yes.
was a character who had a lot of charisma.
Same, same.
So
They teach
sad.
me something new every day. But yeah, Gen Z in the workplace is truly and I think the other thing that is really hard is like the media tries to like demonize Gen Z a lot for their wants and needs, and I think that only makes them feel more isolated at work. And like as an HR team, I'm not going to demonize somebody because they want
Mm.
a job that has work-life balance. I just want to understand what can I do to keep them satisfied in the environment that I am building for them. And there is a hard part where like you might get to a spot where you have to say to somebody, this might not be the environment for you. And if
Yep.
you're willing to do that and be honest with them, I think that goes a long way too.
Oh my god, I totally agree. Like, they're more inclined to stay if you actually share that with them than give them platitudes about things that could come up or opportunities that, they have for learning that aren't concrete that they don't believe.
Yeah. They're going to see through the lies so quickly.
Yeah. I that's kind of your perspective's fascinating. I think that is likely something that really doesn't happen in many organizations is go ask them. Like through surveys, but honestly, just have conversations with them. Like,
Hmm.
what are you valuing about your job? What's working well today? What would give you more purpose and meaning at work? Because that's what I've seen is like engagement is way down, and some of those things people want are the challenge, but you're not accomplishing those things or culture or any of that from, you know, being in an office and having a pool table and having, lunches purchased for you. Like it is, I think like you hit the nail on something and like the idea of authenticity, like they kind of like see through all of that more. Like, and you don't
Hmm.
get a pass for being inauthentic and for not living into your values like you did with previous generations because the older generations it was like, well, it's a job. What do you expect?
Yeah. And this generation is like, no, I expect you to treat me like a mature adult where I have like good benefits and I'm, respected and not screamed at. And I'm here for it. But I also just like I think the hard part about HR is a lot of HR people don't feel like they can be authentic. And I have potentially built my career off of just saying the hard thing where I'm like, "Hey, I've had friends outside of HR, they're like, "Hey, tell me how much that person makes." And I'm like, "You are out of your mind if you think I'm going to tell you like." And I tell like any friends I have outside HR like I have a duty to the company and there are things I will never tell you. Even if we are super great friends, besties till the end of time, I will not tell you anything. But I think like some HR people really struggle. And I think the other thing is telling people when environments aren't right for them is really scary. But like I'm very upfront in our recruiting process that we are like a pre-seed startup, meaning like we don't have everything built. You will not get all the resources you want. And sometimes we're flying the plane while building it. Like if you want to sign up for that and select into that, then you can come work here. But like you should know that about this organization before I try to get you to come work here.
Yeah. Yeah. That's fascinating. I think it
And to be
makes a lot of
honest.
sense. So what other, we talked about like people are one bad day away from job searching. I mean, I've literally seen that. Is interesting. Think you'd like this quote. I don't know the exact quote, but essentially, like, and I've kind of adopted this because it helps my psyche, and I feel like in HR you have to a
Yep.
little bit too. Um, it says that like Gen Z's mentality, like this is a collective view of like how Gen Z thinks about work. I am going to come to your job. I'm going to come to your company. I am going to put in my best work. I am probably going to leave. I'm probably going to leave sooner than you want
Hmm.
me to, but I will
Hmm.
have left your company better than I came, and you will have made like an imprint on my life. And I
Hmm.
was like, that's beautiful because like it's so much easier to be like, oh, you're leaving for like to try to tell someone 10 years younger than you, I don't think you should take that job because I know what
Yeah.
you're chasing and I don't think it's gonna be there.
Yeah.
And I've had both ways. I've had like knowing where you are and knowing you and knowing the challenges we've tried to work through over the last 2 years, you should take this job. I'm so excited for you. And then I've had
Yeah.
the, oh, I don't know how to tell you, but you also just might have to make a mistake for yourself, right? It's
Yep.
like I
Yeah.
imagine our parents when we were in high school dating someone that was horrible for us, being like, I want to shape you, but I know you got to make this mistake.
Yeah. I feel that. That was what my year of government consulting was from me for a mistake. I like craved stability. After doing one startup, I was like, I need a stable job. Went to go work at a government consulting company, and now I've worked at 3 additional startups. So clearly stability is not for me. Like
No.
I'd like the unstable. But I do think like anyone is one bad day away from quitting. It's very keeping that mind on it is so realistic, and it also then helps you actually be a better HR person and like do a better HR job. I think statistically speaking, like people are not staying at jobs longer than 2 to 3 years now, right? So if that's the case, what are we going to do about it? And like truly, do we want to keep people for 10 to 15 years, or do we think like let's get the most out of them for the time that we have them and let's bid them goodbye and maybe they'll come back?
Yeah.
I don't know. Some relationships are like not meant to be. And I also like if Gen Z at least is upfront about what they're committing to you, then you should be upfront about what you commit to them. And that's where I think HR teams can't.
Yeah.
Someone will say, like, I want to come work here, but I want to be a senior director in 2 years. I want to be running multiple teams across 2 functions and leading a strategic initiative. And like someone in HR is not going to be like, yeah, totally, we can, yeah, you can have that. We're going to be like, maybe if we do promotions in 2 years, like you could get there. But that's where I think like Gen
Have no
Z,
idea if that's going to
exactly,
happen. Yeah.
exactly. So like I think it goes both ways. Like if Gen Z is telling you what they want and need, how can we on the HR and like leadership side also potentially do the same?
Yeah. Oh, I'll tell you what was huge for me at a similar stage of my career, like um, high potential program. Do something
Yeah.
that makes
Yeah.
me a part of the long term vision, even if I have no idea, even if there's no promise on the end of that.
Yeah.
But
I
I'm
think
like to your
people,
point. Yeah,
yeah.
going back to you are learning and developing and taking on new challenges every few months.
Yeah. And people are always going to leave. If you live in fear of your employees leaving, that's just like not healthy. I'm like, anytime someone leaves, I'm like, great. What'd you like? As long as you ask them what they left for, and if you hear recurring feedback that your employees are leaving for the same thing every time, then okay, maybe that's a problem you need to go fix. That is a problem you need to fix as HR.
Yeah.
But if you're hearing that they're leaving for like chasing bigger titles or different industries, like you can't control that, and you
Yeah.
should just celebrate it.
What's your advice to probably many of the readers of your newsletter who like are just in a crappy spot, right? Like
Yeah.
they don't love their job. Like I don't know, because like I kind of subscribe to like the thing I don't have any time for, I've experienced in my whole career, is that person who like, and it's harder probably because it happens in HR and it's even more toxic, hates
Hmm.
their job and wants to tell everyone about it, but doesn't leave. And it's like,
Hmm.
you can leave, like go find another job. Oh, you don't think that you like can? Okay, great. Then please shut your mouth and do your
Yeah.
job.
I've been on both sides. I've been the complainer and I've been the complainer to the person complained to. Wow, I did mess that whole
Complaintiff?
thing up.
That's not it.
Complaint to, yeah. New words. But okay, the one thing I will say for HR people is I always tell people the exercise that radically changed my relationship with work was I defined my core values. So I have 3 core values. They are gratitude, curiosity, and honesty. And when I'm interviewing places, I always ask questions that lead to like those 3. Like, how do you show appreciation and recognition? How do you like, I talk to me about how you approach a problem. Can I ask a lot of questions, like that type of thing? And then for honesty, it's like talk to me about how if you like working with direct people or not. But I think like your core values tell you very quickly, is this an environment for me or not? And if it is not an environment for you, or you've gone somewhere because you've chased a title and then quickly found out the environment is not for you, then you should plan leaving, because like you can't make the environment match you. You need to go find an environment
Yeah,
that
nor
works
is it your
with
job
you.
to, right? Because I could see in
Nope.
HR it being like, oh, it's
Nope.
if there's a culture problem, I should fix that. And it's like, no,
No,
many things are not. Yeah.
no. You're not going to fix that boyfriend and you're not going to fix the company. Like you can try really hard, but people, in order to change, it has to come from within. And so, like, the whole crux of it all is like, I cannot change everything. So, you at least have to have the foundational layers that map with my values that make me think I can make them change in a good way versus coming from completely the wrong side and me trying to radically revamp an organization to match what I need to be successful.
I really like that idea of your core values. Every organization has core values. We stay at companies
Mhm.
because they live into their core values.
Mhm.
Take the job because yours are aligned to the company's. keep the job because they remain aligned and you
Yep.
are able to live into those for your people. Leave the company when there's no alignment there and it is not going to be fixed.
Yeah. And with employees, when they come to me and they're like radically unhappy about something, if it's something I can change and fix and make better from an HR perspective, I will work on it. If it is something that I do not think is going to change, I will tell the employee, I just want to be honest with you. I do not think that situation is going to change. They're not going to fire your manager to make you happy. And I think you should think about what you need to be successful. And that might not be here. And that is like terrifying for a lot of HR people to do, but I do it all the time. I'm like, if you don't want to be here, don't be here. I don't want to show up to work and be surrounded by people who hate it here.
Yeah.
So leave. So,
Yeah.
but I think employees are often shocked by that when I'm like, I don't think this is going to work here.
Well, and honestly, I would assume there's shock, and then it's a very cathartic experience of like, we're not going to keep talking about this.
Yeah.
But now I know I have a job here, and I know I have options,
Yeah.
but I control my own destiny.
But if it is truly something terrible that they're complaining about, I will try to change it, to be clear. Like if they're like, that manager is like really
Maybe you should
awful,
leave.
and I would not do that. I will go fix that. But if it's like a situation where I know there's like
Yeah.
no chance of
Untenable.
it changing,
Yeah.
I have to say like, maybe you should leave.
Yeah, I think that's fair. Hey, closing question for you. We talked a little bit about kind of things that are trending relative to transparency, communication, big for next year. Any other things in the HR world you're excited about or you think will kind of disrupt 24?
I think people are going to be so worried about retention. So like where I'm like, leave if you need to leave. I think a lot of HR people are like, they can't leave, because to replace an employee is usually on average 3 to 4 times their salary. And so I think we're rolling into the next year where we've seen employee unhappiness, loneliness, lack of connection continue to rise. And I think next year is going to be about how do we keep our people happy and engaged. And I think it starts with 2 things: pay them correctly and invest in their growth and development. Those are the 2 things employees always want. They want to be paid fairly or know that they're paid fairly, and they want opportunities to grow and develop.
Simple enough.
Yeah.
I
It's
love that.
easy. We can fix
Yeah.
everything.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, hey, Hebba, absolutely awesome spending time with you today. Man, an hour flew by.
I
So
know.
thank you so much for sharing your expertise. Closing note for you, where can people find you, subscribe to your newsletter, plug for anything you want?
I'm annoyingly on LinkedIn. So you can find me and follow me there. And then you can also subscribe to the newsletter simply by Googling "I hate it here." I'm the #1 thing that comes up. It was a big day for me in SEO history that I made it to the #1.
Oh, that's huge.
So you can Google that and subscribe there. And I'm in your inbox every Monday and Friday. Monday is like a deep dive send on something in HR. And Friday is a really fun send where you can submit questions to be answered by people in my community.
Oh,
So you
very
get
cool.
like a Dear Anne or what Dear Abby type
A Dear
email
Hebba.
on Friday. Dear Hebba, but Dear Hebba and friends.
I love
So
that.
that's on Friday.
Awesome.
Cool.
Good
This
deal.
was
Well,
so
hey,
fun.
thank you so much for your time. This was incredible.
This episode has been brought to you by BizLibrary. Head to bizlibrary.com for more information.